Mr. Bruce Tease is the president of Landmark Engineering. He has become a friend, and I've appreciated his graciousness over the years, and I'm going to ask him if you would come at this time and please give your presentation. I think we're good.
Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate you all inviting me here tonight. The pastor's asked me to bring you up to date on what we've done so far, where we're headed, and look forward to the rest of the process to the point where we can actually start a building for you. This is a slide of the most current land plan, this rendering, and I'm not sure if you all can read the text on the right-hand side, but I can't, so I'm going to pull this out to kind of refer myself. But this is all the points that I wanted to cover tonight. And I'm going to turn away from you and just keep referring to this slide. One of you brought this pointer tonight. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. You have about a 7.5 acre site, 7.66 acre site. To get you oriented on this plan, this is Otts Chapel Road. This is Old Baltimore Pike. This is the chapel that we're meeting in right now, and there's the entrance that we all pulled into and the existing stone parking lot. Now, we started out on this job, as Pastor mentioned, we had the Sears house located right in here that was kind of plopped right in the middle of the potential area to build the church. And we tried to come up with land plans that were flexible enough that that could work both if you did or didn't acquire the Sears property. And if some of you have seen the previous land plan, the first one we came up with, we actually had the church oriented right down here near the intersection, with the front doors oriented away from the intersection. That gave us the most flexibility without the Sears property. Once you acquired the Sears property, it really changed. It opened up the whole area into one big, nice rectangular piece. So ever since then, we've been trying to come up with new site alternative that worked with the program and how you all wanted to use the facilities. So when we first started out and we started to meet with the pastor and the rest of the design team here, we sat down and we wanted to evaluate what are some of the features on this site that are good features that we want to retain. So the obvious points are that we wanted to retain, of course, the existing church. We love that playground that you have right now. There were groves of trees here in the back that we thought would be nice to retain. And then we all along had thought of potential uses for the existing single-family structures there that are there in the site. Some of the features of the site that we didn't like when we first came here and we knew we had to do something about. The unsafe entrance that you have right there, and I know many of you may have experienced some traumatic situations trying to get in and out of there, but that's definitely an unsafe entrance. The property has a history of poor drainage. We have had neighbors come. This area right here, there's a lot of water that accumulates in here. Trees were removed by the previous owner of the property, and flooding took place on your adjacent neighbors, so that poor drainage has always been an issue. Another problem with the property is when we started to get some rough ideas of where we thought we wanted to build a building, we put together a geotechnical team who went out and dug test pits. And we found that there's a history of debris being buried on the site. We found places where there was concrete, broken up concrete, wood, miscellaneous fill that was not natural material. So we know that we have to work around that. So we're trying to come up with a plan that allows us to build the site in the configuration that you all would like to have, but also makes adjustments to those features. Let me see, I mentioned the church. Okay, so let me kind of walk you through the proposed land plan. This is the proposed church. This is the front entrance. This is phase 1. Phase 2 is right in here, and the idea would be that phase 1, phase 2 would be linked to the existing church right here. So you've formed a nice little courtyard in the middle. The whole church kind of centers around that playground area. We knew that we need to do something about the entrances. So we've designed a right turn in and a right turn out entrance off of Old Baltimore Pike. We have plenty of area there for the traffic to come in and stack. The only decision that needs to be made is, am I going to park to the right? Am I going to park to the left? There's an area where you can go and go drive through and drop people off. Handicap parking here on the left-hand side, another generous parking lot in the front. In the rear, we have additional, we losing the pointer? There we go. In the rear, we have additional parking that would probably be built in the phase 2 area. We also have a complete entrance here off of Otts Chapel Road. When I say complete, you have all 4 traffic movements, so you can make lefts and rights in and out. The one off Old Baltimore Pike would be limited to rights in and rights out. So we have already given this plan to DelDOT. They've had it for about 2 years now. They're still considering whether we'll be allowed to build these entrances where they are and what configuration they'll be. But as I take you through the process later on, you'll see that we'll reach a point where we will hear back from them. As I mentioned, all the plans center around retaining that existing playground, so we're going to protect those mature trees that are there and protect your ability to make expansions to that playground. The plan also has a lot of additional perimeter landscaping to enhance the site. And of course, all the parking lots are paved, curbed parking, concrete sidewalks, so the whole site will work much better. We've tried to lay it out so that we separate the driving functions from the pedestrian functions as much as possible. The vehicles need to cross the people, but we've minimized the amount of time that happens and the opportunity that has to happen. We've also improved fire accessibility. This building cannot be built today in this current location, in this current configuration of the current fire code. The new buildings have fire lanes around the perimeter, much more improved accessibility, and we've also, by building in here, we've actually improved the accessibility to this building a little bit. We've continually been talking to the fire marshals. We've walked our way through this plan to keep him on board with what we've shown. And also, by making the change to move the church back, we have improved the visibility for the church back here in this corner. So those are all pretty much planning type things that we had to consider. Now kind of moving into the engineering items. One of the big issues has been the poor drainage that I mentioned. What we're doing is this site, when we get done, there's going to be more impervious area than there is today. Under the code, in any good site development you do today, we have to use what's called green technology. The first point is to try to recharge as much of the water into the ground that falls out of the sky and is captured by all these impervious surfaces. So 2 different geotechnical studies were done to attempt to find a place where we could recharge water into the ground. There are systems that we use that collect the runoff, take it underground, and then make it available to recharge so that it doesn't run off the surface. We are not able to do that on this site because of the miscellaneous fill that was placed and the clay layer that's there. It's not that unusual in this area. I would say probably 50% of the sites you can't recharge them. So unfortunately, in this case, we couldn't recharge it. However, what we have come up with is the normal system of storm drainage where you collect the runoff on all these parking lots and the roof drains. And right over here where I'm pointing, there's an underground stormwater management system, large underground pipes that are perforated, surrounded by stone. The stormwater runoff is collected, and then it's released at a controlled rate. The best analogy I could think of is if you were to take your tub and you were to almost completely close the drain and then you turn the water on as hard as you could, you would see the water build up in the tub. And the amount of water that's going out of the tub is controlled by that very small opening. It's our job to size the tub, those underground pipes, so that they can store the runoff, and then they're released from the site at a controlled rate where it won't flood your neighbors and it won't flood the area downstream. So we actually are just completing a study where we collect all that runoff, and the outfall point, get this pointer working here again. The outfall point is right here behind your neighbor and goes right down to Old Baltimore Pike, and then it goes out to what's called Muddy Run. So we're finishing the design of that, and it's our plan to have everything stored underground and then released. We also design the underground system so that we improve the water quality. So the runoff that will come off this site when we're done is actually better than it was before you found this site. So we'll have clean runoff. That's also mandated by government controls, but you'll be basically improving the runoff quality, both quantity and quality, when it leaves the site. The traffic issue and the stormwater issue were the 2 largest issues raised by the public so far in our early meetings, and I'll walk you through that process. The finished site, besides having the sidewalks and the curbing I mentioned, you'll also have public water and public sewer. Right now you're on a septic system, you're on wells. That system will connect you up to regular gravity system that goes to the sanitary sewer treatment plants, and you'll be connected to Artesian Water Company, and we'll also be putting in lines so that we pick up these existing houses that also have a history of problems with the septic in the wells. And of course, with the water, we'll be providing fire connections so that you actually will have sprinklered buildings. Again, more safety for the site. There's also mandated by code that in the parking areas you'll have a minimal amount. There's a minimum amount by code of parking lot lighting required. It's up to you all if you would like to have something beyond that, but we'll also be providing the parking. Now, as the pastor mentioned, many of you have been, I guess, disappointed in the progress so far. I just want to explain to you that the process has changed as we've been going through it. I think there's been a recent history of complaints in the general public that the county process is not an open enough process. So in response to that, we have doubled the size of Newcastle County Council. There's more representatives out there and representing smaller districts. There's more opportunities for questions. There are many more public hearings at which the public can come and react. When we submit plans, we're not submitting them to just a few agencies. I believe when we make the next submission, we send out 30 drawings to different agencies in the state who review it. So it's a much more open government in reaction to giving people the opportunity to respond. It slows down the process. And that's just a fact of life. I think if we do a good job, it's not going to interfere with the eventual construction. It's just going to be a little frustrating because the process does take a while. But let me walk you through the process. When we first started out, we were given a survey that the previous owners of the property had done, and we found that survey was very inaccurate. So we sent out our own crews. We did a new perimeter survey. That's a survey that basically defines the perimeter of the property that you all own and make sure that it's all free and clear. There's no easements or dedications that have been done. And then we did a topographic survey in which we located all the buildings, the trees, utilities, elevations of everything that's there on the site. And that's the basis for all the future plans that our office is preparing. We also had to do a preliminary traffic analysis. And what that is we figured out, we actually went out, you all may have seen the counters out there on the roadway. We actually put counters out on the roadway along Otts Chapel Road and Old Baltimore Pike. And those counters counted the number of trips for an entire week, 24 hours a day. And basically what we did was we picked up the peaks of those adjacent roadways. And as you would all assume by common sense, it's the commuting hours in the morning when you all go to work. It's the commuting hours in the evening when people come home. And then there's a much broader peak during the day, mostly on weekends when people are out, running errands and making deliveries. Then we also counted the only driveway to the church. And we found the peak times for the church, of course, were Wednesday evenings and then during Sunday. And we plotted those graphs on top of each other so that we could prove to the public and to DelDOT that the traffic generated by this facility does not significantly impact the main traffic issues out on the roadway, which are the peak hours. So we've taken that information, we've submitted it to DelDOT, Delaware Department of Transportation, and basically we are asking for a waiver for a traffic impact study. A traffic impact study would require a considerable expenditure on your all part, and basically we would have to do a much more detailed analysis of the traffic out on the roadways, and we'd probably have to study 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 different intersections, add the trips that are generated by the church, and see if those intersections have adequate capacity. So we believe that we have accumulated enough information, we've submitted to DelDOT, that we are entitled to a traffic waiver. So we're looking forward to not having to do that. As I mentioned earlier, we also did a geotechnical study, and basically they did extensive digging in this area where at one time we thought the building might go, and then they did more general holes and borings over in this area where we knew we were going to be putting the stormwater management, and of course now we have proposed the church. This is where they found a history of miscellaneous debris. The soils are not consistent. They're clay-type soils that are fairly prevalent in Delaware, and if they are encountered with moisture, the clay expands and contracts. It is not a good soils to build on top of, especially stormwater management or a building. So we will come up, and working with Jim, we'll have the proper foundations in the building. And like I said, we've designed a stormwater system that will work around that issue. So we feel satisfied we've done enough work on that end. I guess the first plan that was submitted was a plan that doesn't have a whole lot more detail in this plan. It was called an exploratory sketch plan. It was submitted almost exactly a year ago to Newcastle County. This plan goes just to Newcastle County, and they go through it. They compare it to their code. They wrote a letter back to us, very detailed letter of the different items they were concerned about. They were concerned about the traffic, stormwater management, having adequate landscaping, the orientation of the church. They basically just gave us all the items they were concerned about. Most of them were anticipated, and it's an opportunity for them to comment. Then we went to a planning board public hearing. That's the first public hearing that the public got to see the plan. And there was a pretty good turnout and some very nice, most of the neighbors, most of them were your immediate neighbors, I guess, that came from the adjacent neighborhoods. And again, the two big issues for the church being built in their neighborhood was traffic and stormwater, or as a lot of them characterized it, environmental. So when we go back the next time, we're prepared to address those not only in general statements, but very, very detailed studies. So today, oh yeah, the other point I should mention is that just last Thursday, we met with Councilman Stephanie McClellan. She's your representative for County Council in this area. And we showed her the plan. I think the meeting went very well, and she was very receptive to it. She gave us some heads up on some of the questions that might come from the neighbors, so we can address them. So we are going to have a meeting with them. I believe it was set for November the 20th. And we'll be meeting with the neighbors on November the 20th. We feel that this meeting is not required, but we feel that it is very helpful to engage the public and your neighbors early and hear any issues they have and address them before we go to any public hearing with County Council. So that will be the purpose of that meeting. Our deadline is that we have to submit the next plan. It's called a preliminary plan to Newcastle County by the end of November. That's the deadline because it will have been a year since the last plan. When that plan will show all the preliminary engineering for the site. It'll show all the curbing, the landscaping, all the different utilities that are required to make this site go, stormwater management. As I was talking to Jim and the pastor about, there'll be enough detail on this plan that for the first time we can actually give it to a contractor and get you all a fairly accurate number of what we think you should budget for site work on this plan. After that plan's submitted and we get the comments from Newcastle County, we go back to the planning board again. This is the second time the public gets to see what's proposed and react with any questions. So we'll be responding to the earlier concerns they had, and it'll be the first time we'll show them the new orientation for the building. This will be the first time that they will have seen that. After we complete that plan, then we're turned loose that we can do site construction plans, building plans, and a record plan. The record plan is another planning plan, goes after the preliminary plan. That is the plan where we commit that we are building a certain 1,000 square foot phase 1 building, a certain size phase 2 building. We're going to build the entrances and the parking lot in that configuration. And once that plan is approved by County Council, you have 5 years to start construction, and once you start construction in 5 years, you are recorded. You could build the phase 1 building right away, and you could build the phase 2 building whenever you're ready. But you're locked in. You have approval to build the facilities as shown in this plan. To get that record plan approved, we have to do complete construction plans for the site. So these construction plans will be all the plans that the contractors, the builders need to build the site. So we can get final pricing from them. We can break it up into phases. Obviously, you don't want to build all the parking day one. You won't need it because the facilities won't be expanded. So those plans will have all the details, and when they're put together with Jim's building plans, they're a complete package that you can build. So right now, we are at the community meeting part, and we have to work our way through the preliminary plans, the site construction plans, the record plan, turn them into all the review agencies, get their approval, and then you'll be free to start construction. So just roughing out a schedule moving forward, assuming that there's no hidden agendas that we don't know about on the political side. That's always the tough part to predict, is the political end. there's no reason why you shouldn't be starting construction next fall. So I know it can be frustrating, it's a lengthy process, but to protect everybody's right to comment on what's being built next to them, to be sure that all the codes are being followed, the process is long and drawn out. I can tell you that all that you have been through so far is not that unusual to me. It's a typical situation. I think that you all have benefited from having strong leadership, a good group that knows what they want and has been very good at defining what they want. The biggest problem we all have is quite often working with owners that really don't know what they want. So I think you've benefited from a strong leadership team, and I think that you can look forward to a project with successful completion. Amen. Thank you.
Jim Nowland came to us by high recommendation from other pastors who either used him or wish they had used him. And we have just tickled to have him on board. And I want to just to remind you that both of these men come to us by searching out and testing many engineers, builders, and the building team narrowing it down, funneling it down to these two fellows. We're committed to them, and we're thankful to have them. Jim, won't you come and explain your program?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for having us here tonight. You've heard Bruce go through a lot of what you've been going through for the last couple of years, which is the important part. All the work that's been done has been by Bruce and his staff and Landmark Engineering. And I can just say, as a contractor who works with a lot of different site engineers in the state, and the 3 states in the area, they are the tops in my mind. And I'm not just saying that. They really do a great job. So you are in good hands, and I'll also comment on what Bruce had just said about your leadership and your team. You do have a great group of folks at the top coming to us exactly with what they want, well thought out plans, and a very organized approach. We work with lots of different businesses and churches and schools, and that's not always the case. And it truly makes our job easier to have the leadership that you folks do have. So I'm thankful for that, and I want to say that before I go on too far. What I've given the opportunity to talk to you tonight, and honestly, Nowland Associates, as your designer and your builder going forward, we really haven't done a whole lot for you yet, other than to give a little bit of advice over the last year or so and do some preliminary estimates. Our role is to really, from this point forward, to help complete the design of your church, and then ultimately to break the ground and start constructing it for you. So I'm going to take this opportunity just to give you a quick overview of who Nowland Associates is, what some of the things are that we've built in the area, and what our responsibilities will be in the months to come. Since I can't tell you a lot of progress, what we've designed for you, I'll show you what we're going to be doing for you. So I have a few slides. I might go through them, might skip over a couple of them, but it'll kind of help me out with some talking points to tell you what I'd like to here tonight. So I'm going to start by telling you who we are, and follow that up with what do we build, what kinds of construction are we involved with, have we been involved with, what is this design build process. As Pastor has said, you've selected to work with us, to which we are very grateful. We're design build contractors. I want to just give you a quick description of what exactly that is. Project specifics, that's when we'll talk just briefly on your project and what's different about it and what we'll be doing for you. And then, of course, we'll open up to questions and answers from the whole team up here. So who we are a third-generation family-owned construction business founded by my grandfather, Gifford Nowland, back in '42. And then through my father and my brothers and I, we still are a true family business and have been in this area for our whole existence. A lot more than just our family, of course. We have project managers on staff, architects on staff, engineers, estimators, and then in the field, swinging the hammer, we've got, I think, 6 superintendents and a whole network, probably about 20 or 30 field construction workers as well. So that's who Nowland Associates is, as the whole team. We are located, nice little Christmas picture here. I'm sorry I didn't have a fall version, but we're not too far from some snow, I think. We are right across from the new Lowe's that they just built in Newark. So that's our building as last December whenever we took this picture, just to let you know where we are. What do we build? Like I said, we do commercial construction, all types, which includes municipal, commercial, educational, healthcare, religious, manufacturing, industrial, agricultural, and financial. Anything 2 stories or less, non-residential, that's pretty much what we specialize in and what we design and build. Since '42, that's well over 750 different projects around here. I won't start to name them, but there are a lot of them around on every road you might drive down, things that we've been involved with. We do about $20 million worth of work a year. Anything from a small little $50,000 job to as large as a $40 million project. New construction and renovations in all 3 of the states, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania. Example, municipal projects, the new county building we just completed for Cecil County, just over the state line last year. Commercial projects such as this one, this 2-story office building that we designed and built a couple years ago for a local realtor. Educational, we do work with some private schools like St. Andrews and West Nottingham Academy. This was a new science center that we built a few years ago. Healthcare, again, this was a doctor that came to us and wanted to open up his own practice with a couple suites. We designed this in-house and built that a couple years ago in Middletown area. Manufacturing, W.L. Gore and Associates, one of our bigger clients. We've built lots of facilities for them over the years. Industrial, you know, your simple metal building warehouses, tools and more. This was one we finished last year up towards Wilmington. Financial, whether it's Mercantile or Wilmington Trust or Bay First or Baynet or PNC, we've built branches for a lot of different folks around. Agricultural, again, here's some of the simpler buildings, glorified garages, and then religious, and on religious. Now, Middletown Baptist Church you may be familiar with. I started out with that slide, not coincidentally, because the plan that you folks have come to us with is very similar, has some similarities. Yours certainly has its own, will take its own shape and form in the months to come, but that would have been one of our churches that we built here recently. I'll just quickly go through a few of the other ones. In the church category, now here's your neighbor right up the road, Praise Assembly. We just built an addition for them to kind of tie in with the rest of their building. I put that on there because it might be, you might recognize it being down the road. Simpson United Methodist, we just finished a year ago. Elkton Church of God, a very simple, small church outside of Elkton. Turned out nice. Unitarian Universalist. That one goes back quite a few years, the one here in Newark. So that's just a glimpse at some of the different things we've done, just so you know we have some experience in the type of project that we're getting ready to do for you folks. Project delivery method, design build. I'd mentioned, well, what's design build? Essentially, that's you can think of that as we're your department store, your one-stop shop. I mean, you've gone out and you've hired a Landmark and Bruce Tease to do your site design, and now to get the building done, you've selected Nowland Associates to kind of coordinate all the rest. I don't have the laser pointer. I don't know that I need it. It might have me spend too much time on any given slide, but thanks, Bruce. We will be the ones here that will hire the electrical engineers to design your electrical systems. We'll hire the structural engineers, of which I'm a structural engineer, so I have a little expertise in that area. We'll hire the mechanical contractors, the architects, and in this case, architects, structural engineers are on our staff. We do that within our own walls. Some of the other folks, mechanical, electrical engineers, we have a network of subs that we'll work with to design those systems. And then what's unique with design build is besides just handling and organizing the design, we're going to be your builders also. So we're a part of that team from the very beginning, and that's really the benefit of the design build, is that our superintendents and our project managers with the expert experience on what's cost effective, what's the best way, what's the efficient way to build it, what's the best way to build it, can all be incorporated from the very first day that we start design, the wall sections or the floor plans for your building. And that's what our company does. That's what we specialize in. Project specifics, coming down to the home stretch here. What's specific to your project is that Lighthouse Baptist Church, your committee, and led by Pastor Whitmer, has done all of the programming, most of the programming over the last several years. You have a very good idea of what your needs are, what you want it to look like, what you want your floor plan to look like, where you want your bathrooms. You've really come to us with a lot of your programming needs already defined. Schematic design. You've come to us with a schematic design that says, here's what we want our church to look like. Here's how we want the spaces to lay out. Now we need you to just kind of give it a once-over, complete the design for us, and make it a reality and build it. So here's the plan that you've come to us with. That's the floor plan. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, and you've seen it before. And these models, which are wonderful. This is a service we usually offer to people to do for your own presentations, and I think you folks have a lot of talent within your church that have been able to help out building models such as the one over here. It really gives us the answer key, makes our job so much easier. We just have to come and build it now in a cost-effective and quality way. And there's the other version. Now, I'll skip right through In Progress by Landmark. Bruce has talked to you for the last however many minutes about all the stuff they've done with the planning and the site design and approval processes, and he's gone over his slide in great detail on what's been going on related to the site. So what's Nowland Associates going to do, and I've kind of answered a lot of these as we've gone through, we're going to complete the design. We're going to take that schematic and we're going to review it and make all the architectural, structural, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems be complete to meet your needs. We're also going to do some planning for Phase 2. We're not going to go into great detail on Phase 2 at this time with all the complete design, but we've already had some additional meetings and discussions with your committees about in that extra square footage down the road in Phase 2, what are you most likely going to want to put in there? So we've had those discussions, and we're going to use that. We're going to discuss the building we're in today. What are the future uses for that and the other houses that are going to be saved down the way? How's that all going to work in the big picture? That's all part of our master planning. We're not going to do all the details of these intimate spaces, but we're going to consider it so that when that design of the new structure is complete, it's going to complement all the other facilities that you already have and the plans for the future. Of course, prepare the construction documents, 20 pages of detailed drawings with window sections and wall sections and finish schedules and carpets and tiles. All of that's part of the design that we'll be coordinating with your committee, and I'm sure we'll learn who the leaders are to get to pick out the colors along the way. Or maybe you will leave that up to some of our interior designers to bring you some color palettes for approval. It's all part of the process that we'll handle for you. Some chuckling over here. They've been through that before and know that there's a lot of opinions on what color carpet you ought to have. So sometimes it's easier to hire some professionals for that. The bidding and the estimating, of course, we'll coordinate all of that. We'll work with all the different subcontractors as well as ourselves, determining what the costs are and what the cost-effective ways are to build. There's always more than one way to build a certain wall or a certain room, and we'll really try to bring our expertise to the table to do it in a cost-effective way, to spend your money the same way I would spend it if it were mine. I know this is a very personal endeavor. All of you folks have given and will continue to give towards this building, and I want you to be assured from me, every dollar we spend when we're designing this, I will treat it as if it were my own. How would we spend our money? Which means we're not going to take every shortcut that you can take, because buying cheap hardware is not going to do you any good. Right. 6 months into the project when it starts wiggling or falling off. You know, our name's going to be attached to this for a long time, and we want it to be a quality building, but we want it to be in the way that that was a good use of your dollar and not wasteful. So we'll work with your committee for the next several months on determining and recommending where you should put a little more emphasis in things and where maybe not. Manage the construction. That kind of goes without saying. Once the design is all complete and the permits are all in hand, we'll be out there managing the construction both in the field and in the office. Our project managers are the ones in our office who will be ordering the materials and setting the schedules and having all the correspondence, and then we'll have an on-site superintendent who's the guy out here every day making sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to do and making sure that they're doing it up to our standards. Now, some of those workers will be on our payroll swinging the hammer, and a lot of other people will be different subcontractors that'll work for us. But we'll be managing the whole thing. Back up to that, I don't have a particular slide related to the schedule, but what I can tell you from our standpoint is that this whole process really is driven by the site design and the site approvals. And there's, as I've praised Landmark before, they're doing a heck of a job for you, and will continue to do a good job for you. It's all those 30 agencies that will when they finally give you that approval and you have that record plan approval and are ready to start, our job is to make sure that we are 100% ready on that day. So we kind of work backwards from the schedule that Bruce has laid before you today about wanting to start next fall. And that's why we know, well, maybe it'll take 8 or 9 months to build the facility, and maybe it'll take us another month to really bid and get all the details worked out with the costs, and another 3 or 4 months to do the design. So that kind of brings us to where we are today. We are ready to hit the ground running now with really starting on our design so that we can make sure our design and our estimating and everything is ready to go the day that your site design is approved and you have record plan approval. That's our goal, and we'll make sure that we have everything ready for you at that point. This is just a quick slide on the phase 2. I won't even go into great detail with that other than to let you know we have put a little bit of thought behind that little connector link that was shown on the site plan. So with that, I'll leave it with our friendly little smiley face safety guy for questions for both of us.
All right, would you stand up, please? Give yourself a little bit of stretch. Going to ask the sound people to get some microphones up here, and we are going to take your questions, all right? Stretch your questions. Just answer the first one. There's a little bit of levity going around about who actually picked the colors of walls and carpets. It's very obvious that our teenagers should have that opportunity. And I'm sure there'll be purples and pinks and who knows what, teals and whatever. All right, you stretched out. Have a seat, and we will take some questions from you. So, guys, if you would stand up here, please. Microphones are coming. Pastor Pritt, would you help also, please?
Test.
All right. Any question is fair game, especially to Bruce and Jim. Yes, Mr. Willie.
This is for Mr. Nowland. Is there anything with the new buildings that can be like altered down the road if we decide to change anything? Like, I know somebody in the staff wanted to know if like the seats could be changed later, so credit cards could be used to pay ties in the back of the seats.
Willie.
He had a concern with that. But
Willie has just asked if it's possible to have debit slides in the back of the chairs so that we can pay tithes in the pews and the seats. But he actually, what was the first part of the serious question?
Is there anything like can most of the stuff be altered if we needed to do it later down the road?
Okay, talk about the building a little bit and the steel frame span.
That's really part of our design, and in order to do a good job with the design, we need to consider the flexibility for the future. Something that comes to mind, and that we've talked about before, are clear span frames for your building, so that any of the interior walls, well, maybe in the later you decide this classroom's too small or too big and you want to change it. We want to be able to accommodate that in the future. That's maybe a broad example. Something simpler, I cannot think of an example, but to answer your question, yeah, good design we'll look forward towards what possible things might want to be changed in the future and how do we accommodate that so that it can be done without sacrificing a lot of cost and work at that point.
This is a steel frame, total span building. There's no interior load-bearing walls. The walls can always be changed, rearranged, or as our church grows, totally eliminated into one giant sanctuary if we so choose to do that, if that's what the Lord would have us do. All right, other questions? Yes, Butch?
Mr. Nolan, on that site where the church is going to be building the fill, what he was talking about, the filling of the ground, do you find any concerns with that and in starting the construction?
No, what we did was we tried to define the area where this miscellaneous fill is found. Our goal, of course, when we build the site would be to make it so the cut and fill, the amount of earth that's dug up, is used as fill material somewhere else on the site, and that the goal would be when all was said and done, you didn't have to bring in any earth and you didn't have to take any away. Now that we know the areas where we expect to encounter some material that's not the most suitable, that also is the area where we are putting our underground stormwater management system. That's going to be pipes and it's going to be stone. So we have to dig a big hole to do that. So by digging that hole right where you have some material that we call as unsuitable material, we're basically taking that into account. We have to get a better look at that material depending on how wet it is, what time of year it is. We might be able to use that somewhere else on the site, or we may have to actually remove it. But we have enough, we don't have a plan up there anymore, but we have that open green area. Bring that up, Pastor.
Oops.
We have the open green area there in the open back left corner, which I didn't really talk about. That's just the open play area that you can all use. We have that area where we can put some of the fill material, and initially we won't be building the parking lot just below it, so we can put it in there too. So we have a decent idea where the unsuitable material is. We'll know more when the construction is going on, but we've come up with a plan that we think is flexible enough, so even if we're have some reasonable surprises, we'll be able to accommodate that in the site plan.
Jim, how would that affect the footers in the building, knowing that there is questionable debris under there?
Well, knowing that there is questionable debris, we'll be better prepared to have the engineers on staff ready to test that soil. Certainly the county through their inspectors, but even before them, the site engineers and ourselves will make sure that that subgrade is good material, and if it's not, we'll cut it out all the way and bring it in. Season plays a important role into that when you're bringing in the material and you're compacting it, and you have to meet certain requirements. Until we start digging, we won't know how much is there or how much needs repaired, but it's certainly something we do all the time. And we know how to do it and how to do it right, and it'll be tested before things are placed, before the footings are placed, so that we can be sure that there won't be any settlement in the future. And just to touch on some of all the underground, there's a lot of sophisticated piping and drainage systems and things that are not out of the ordinary. Like Bruce says, maybe 50% of the time they run into these things. Everything he's talked about on this project, we've built many times, and know how to do it, and are very comfortable that it's not out of the ordinary, and it's a cost-effective way to handle the situation that this site presents.
One of the advantages to not putting in a pond is that we retain a field, a play field. Jim was quoting earlier, it was Mike Briscoe, a fellow who works with Bruce, was estimating maybe a half acre to an acre taken up if it was an actual pond, standing pond or a dry basin, and that would be worthless land to us. And so the stormwater management into the north, under the north parking lot, not only handles the water efficiently and environmentally the right way, but it also allows us to have play area. Somebody else?
Pastor, if I could follow up on
Sure.
the concern about the footings for the building also, is that when we decided where we were going to do the testing, we concentrated on the areas where the building was going to go. And the geotechnical engineer got some preliminary loading, and we sent them the preliminary drawings that have been done for the building. So they've already given foundation recommendations based upon the material that they already found. And they're slightly bigger than what you might find in that situation from what I've told, but not significantly so. So they've got that accounted for already.
Okay. Question, Dave Jones.
Ox Chapel Road entrance, because that's going to be an all-ways entrance and exit, will there be a traffic light there?
No. DelDOT does not put in any traffic lights without meeting what's called traffic warrants. Traffic warrants are a history of accidents, a history of significant traffic. You have to meet those warrants to have a signal put in. So actually, the councilwoman commented on that also. We met with her. You have right now the entrance. You have an entrance. What's the name of that development?
Forest Ridge.
I keep forgetting that name. Forest Ridge has their entrance right over here off the slide. They have all their traffic movements. They have a little bypass lane, and there is no light to that development. This entrance is proposed to put the left turn lanes in kind of halfway between their entrance and the intersection up here, Ox Chapel and Old Baltimore Pike. So initially, we would envision that you'll be building a left turn lane to get in with no traffic light, and then you'll have a lane to turn into when you come out. What will probably happen is whether it's the church or your neighbors, whichever one meets the traffic warrants first, will probably get a traffic signal eventually. Once one traffic signal is there, that traffic signal, by virtue of where it is going to create gaps for the other user to get out. So whichever one has a traffic signal first, the other user is going to benefit from it. I highly doubt that we'll get to a situation where you'll have both of them signalized. But even if you said, we have the money, we're going to pay for it ourselves, let's put in a traffic signal, you would not be allowed to do it until you met the traffic signal warrants.
Good, very good question. Somebody else? Yes, sir. Al.
Yes, my question, you were showing over the other side of the parking lot, you had a concern about you were flooding the neighbor, and that, with you putting in the draining system and that, are you easing his concerns?
Yes. We're making a significant change without getting into too much detail. All right. Without getting into too much detail, the drainage on this site's broken into a couple components. You have drainage that's running down right here in this area and goes into a major storm drainage system that runs along Old Baltimore Pike and eventually goes to Muddy Run, the creek that you cross if you're on Old Baltimore Pike. You have the flows that are generated just on your site, and then you have what we call bypass flows that are basically run through this low wet area. If any of you walk back there, it's wet almost all the time. That's getting a lot of overland flow that goes all the way back up these properties, some of which goes all the way back to the crossing with I-95. It's a very large area. So what we're going to be doing is we're picking up all your site runoff, including some of the runoff that today gets into this system here that doesn't have enough capacity, and we're going to take it and control that runoff. And we are restricting the amount of runoff that leaves our site so that when you combine what naturally connects in both along the road and in these off-site areas, that we will not exceed the capacity of this system here. And we are making sure that any runoff from this site, not one drop of it goes on to the adjacent neighbors. It all stays on our site. So you're definitely not making it any worse, and it looks like you're going to be making it better.
Is he happy with that, with your finding?
He came to the planning board public hearing. We had the opportunity in this kind of forum to give him a general answer. He came and approached me after the meeting, and we talked in more detail, and I think that they are happy with the approach. At that time, I had very general answers. When we meet and talk this time, I can actually show them plans with cross sections of what's going to be put in, results of drainage study that will show that all the different storms that take place, the amount of water that's runoff from that's released from this site is actually lower than it was before you built anything. So I think the odds are pretty good that we'll be able to address his concerns, yes.
Okay. Questions about the building itself, questions about the site, entrances, traffic, anything. It's fair game. Mr. Lacey.
Bruce, you mentioned some plans that must be presented at the end of November. Preliminary plans?
Yes.
Those are plans that pretty well we're up to speed on. They can be, they're ready to be presented. Is that at the end?
we've been working towards that goal for quite some time. We'll be in good shape to get those plans in. Those plans, if they're turned in by the end of the month, get mailed out to, well, actually now it's turned around to where it's the consultant's responsibility to mail it to these approximately 30 different agencies. And they have 1 month, 20 working days to respond. They send all their comments back to Newcastle County. Newcastle County Planning Department gathers all those comments, and then they send a response out to us. So to answer your question, yes, they're in pretty good shape. They're going to show preliminary concepts on all the engineering, so all these different agencies can look at them. And as we've been discussing with Jim, there'll be enough detail on there that could go through, get some rough budgeting from contractors to have a really good idea of what costs you could expect.
So while those counties, agencies are taking their 20 days to review, we're going to be taking those 20 days to do some pretty good estimates on the site work, so that at the end of, I guess, December maybe, we'll have a pretty good firm number on the real design of how things are shaping up.
Okay? Get some fresh voices. We got the same hands. I'll be happy to come back to you if we get, yes.
Yes, I have a question for you. I think for you. While where the new building is located is where our trailer and modular is, how are those things going to be met?
They will, most of it will be met automatically in the new building or in the elimination of what is done in here, so we can do what we were doing in the modular here then, and we are not planning to retain those. We are not allowed to. We have a certain square footage that we have to stay under with our entire plan. The modular is planned to whether we give it to another church or do something like that, whatever the Lord directs, we'll do. The office trailer is a rental that the county wants us to get rid of, as soon as we can, and we try to get extensions to continue on of having that. But those needs, fellowship, whatever, will be met in this building when our auditorium is on top of it.
What about during construction?
During construction, we will be extremely creative and patient and be so happy. And we've been guaranteed by these guys that they understand we need to park somewhere. Jim understands that. Jim understands that we're going to be able to need to use this building. And you want to comment any on that?
Yeah. Again, we'll look for direction from the church. We can certainly take those trailers and pick them up, move them to a nice new place on a temporary basis until all the buildings are complete. We've got the equipment to do it, the expertise to do it. It all costs money, and that's where we'll be working with the committee to decide how important is it to move these trailers. Is it a good use of the money, or can you maybe work in cramped quarters for a little bit of time and spend that money elsewhere on the new building? Don't really know the direction it's going to go yet, but we're going to help give some costs so we can make the right decisions when we get to that time. But certainly there's enough space out there for your trailers, our trailers, all kinds of trailers. So we'll be very creative, and that kind of leads into, once construction starts, we'll have a construction site, and yet you have a very active church with things going on, I don't know how many nights of the week. We'll be very conscious of that and make sure there's a very clean, safe, well-marked, and that we can both get along on the same site without incident.
Yeah, you won't be parking, your Buick next to a Caterpillar, a giant, yeah. I want to make something real clear. In the phase 1, which is the auditorium, this parking lot will not be built. This entrance will somehow, over here, and you'll have opportunity to park here, an opportunity to park here. This is all, am I right, Jim? This is all phase 1, or Bruce?
Right.
All this is phase 1. This is not necessary, these number of parking spaces, until the Lord allows us to build this 9,000 square foot building. So you'll be coming here and whatever, and we'll retain all this as green until that point. Did you want to comment on the last question?
If I could add to that, we have to prepare what's called a sediment and erosion control plan. We have to make sure that none of the sediment leaves the site during construction. As part of that sediment erosion control plan, we have to define exactly where all the construction equipment's going to go on the site, going to come into the site and leave the site, where the trailer's going to be placed, where are they going to stockpile topsoil, stone, where the concrete truck's going to go. All those things have to be looked into. So as part of that, we have to sit down with your construction committee and make sure that you can continue to operate your church while this construction is going on. So there'll be designated areas where you can park. There'll be areas where you can access the site. We, of course, are going to strive to make sure that the construction activities are separated from your activities as much as possible. So all that will be taken into account.
Donna, we may have to realistically, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, but during that 8 months of construction or whatever, is that a general idea? We may have to go to 2 services when we eliminate the video overflow, and that may just encourage us to grow and pop into that new building. All right. Somebody else, yes.
From start to finish, when everything is approved, when will we be in that building?
Okay, there's no possible way I can answer that question from start or finish when we'll be in that building. There's a big factor that we're not necessarily addressing tonight, and that is when all permits are done, that doesn't mean that Jim can bring his construction things here unless we have the money to let Jim roll. And the lenders are on board with allowing us to borrow what we don't have. So, but the schedule is, if everything goes perfectly, you're talking, and a very strong or a very courageous Pollyanna idea would be September, realistically October, November, we get permits, fall of '09. Jim comes in, 8 months from that is when our building would be complete. Is that right, guys? Is that about on track?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Again, until all the details are worked out, we can't have a real specific schedule, but 8 and 9 months is easy to do the construction. The one thing I will throw out there, though, is it all starts with the site work. And we've talked about a lot of imported fill and compaction, all these things which are greatly affected by the weather. So beginning December 1st or November 1st is not the opportune time to begin, both in making progress and in the costs. I mean, yes, you can work through the winter, but it always costs more money. So again, I won't try to guess when the approvals will happen. We've never been successful in guessing when they'll approve
So
things.
basically,
but
Jim,
that schedule could be dependent on the time of year as well.
So basically you're asking our church that in 2009 we pray for massive global warming?
I am not saying that.
All right. So, hey, strike that. Don't let that hit the internet. All right. Yes, Abigail.
The basketball court will have to be replaced. But there's plenty of opportunity.
The sacred cow. Those are gush from the
You
whole
like
thing.
playing basketball? There's plenty of opportunity. I'm sure the pastor will point to the pavilion, which again I kind of skipped through, but there'll be a pavilion there with plenty of trees in the grove. There'll be an opportunity you could put basketball there. We've had locations where we've actually painted the basketball court in a lower use area that's used for parking. We could do that. Or there's anywhere that you see green around you, we could put a basketball court in. There's plenty of opportunity for that. That's not controlled by the county. You don't have to do that right at the beginning, and you can go back and do it whenever you feel like it. As long as you don't want to build a stadium. You'll be
One exciting thing that I do is that when all of our leaders came together with a brainstorming and seeing what God is doing with youth and all that kind of thing, it rise to the top that the 9,000 square foot building have a gymnasium in it. Okay, so that, by the Lord's timing, will come in His plan, His desire. So we'll not forget you. All right, right here, let's go like popcorn and hit as many questions as we can in the remaining 10 minutes or so. Yes?
So we're going to keep the White House and the Sears houses?
We are trying very hard to keep all of the houses. This plan of this entrance off of Otts Chapel Road being between the houses is we're hoping with DelDOT that will go through, and we're praying and hoping that we will not have to lose the White House. We have not poured very much money into the White House because we know there is a possibility that entrance would have to go through the White House. But we're trying very hard to keep it, and if we do keep it, we'll beautify it.
There's plans for its use.
There's always something you can do with it. Sure. Something else. Yes, Mr. Greg.
Is the playground going to get bigger?
It is. The playground, can you give us...
That was a quick answer.
Can you give
So-
us, Mr. Bruce, a idea of how much bigger? I don't know, from what it is now.
Well, what's shown there now is approximately the same size, the green area you see there right now, that you have today. But until you build phase 2, the playground will be twice the size.
We'll also be putting into the playground area the Ronald McDonald House stuff. No, that's real. The Ronald McDonald House gave us a bunch of huge playground equipment that is just beautiful. Big, huge. What are they? Where's Mark? What size are the poles to that thing? They're giant timbers. They're great stuff. It's just great stuff with spirals and climb things and towers. Yeah, it's a project, and some of you guys were there and ripped it apart. It was great. It's great. So that's all stored down in a shed, and we'll be adding that. There's really nothing too much hindering us from adding that now if we can get the dimensions. Yes, Bessie.
The entrance and exits from Oval most likely will only be a right turn in, is that correct?
Right turn in and right turn out.
It will be a right turn.
Well, that's our plans, that's what we're shooting for. It's totally unrealistic to get any left turns there. And it is not uncommon when you're that close to a major intersection for them to take away the right turn out because they figure that there will be those, regardless of what the signs say, will try to get across and make that quick left right there. And you have that real short little merging area. So we're going to try to convince DelDOT to allow us to do that.
So
Otts Chapel Road.
it's all
No,
turns.
it's every movement's what we've got planned in there now, all the movements. And when the pastor was talking about changing the house, this location is not the location that I would have chosen if you had just had a blank piece of property and we were going to try to get that entrance in there. It's a little bit too close to this development if I could start with a blank piece of paper. Right now, we're trying to get DelDOT to approve everything with the entrance between the two houses. There could come a point in time where we have to make a decision. Do we want all 4 movements or do we want that house? But we're just trying to be prepared.
Somebody else, another popcorn question. Fresh voices, and then we'll come back, okay? Yes.
On the first phase, you're gonna plan to build that parking lot here in the corner first, or where are you gonna start first phase?
All this parking would be put under the first phase, and then this parking right here. It would be up to you if you want to put in some nice convenient parking along there, but I don't think that will be required. There's 2 different sets of requirements. There's the minimum requirements required by Newcastle County. You can't get your permit to occupy the church unless you have a minimum number of spaces. That doesn't mean that you can't decide based upon your own real demands to put in more parking. That'll be up to you. Sometimes people spend too much time worrying about what the code says and not thinking about what their own real needs are going to be. So there'll come a point where you all, I know that that you've done some counts already. It would be good to find out how many cars are here versus a number of people that are attending service. I know Jack's done some of that already, so that you can define exactly what you think you need, and you may find that it's a little bit more than what the county is going to require.
To expand on that just a little bit, as Bruce said earlier, as he gets into the final construction documents related to the site, we'll work together and give them our input on what sequence we want to build things and how we think it'll work, because they'll have to note that on their drawings for approval. And in terms of the order, what's the very first thing? Again, just to kind of guess, I would say the parking lot in the back corner there with the storm drains underneath would probably be the starting point. We would want to get all that in ground, in place, so that now we have a place to park when we come up and start working on this parking lot. But that's all part of what we'll be working out together as we go forward here in the final stages of the site design.
We're going to get large golf carts and drive down to this building. Don't you worry about that. All right, couple more questions and we are done. Fresh voices, okay? People who have not asked questions yet. Yes, Mark.
Phase 1 is the old one look like going to be the only entrance in?
No, our plans would be to build both entrances.
Okay, so you
Even-
just have one small road or like a double road going in?
That's correct.
Yes, one.
Even if you
straight line.
didn't need it or didn't want it, with the way regulations are changing, I would build them the next minute after we get that approval.
All right, somebody else. Good questions, great questions, fresh voices. All right, yes, sir.
Are the storm drains under the parking lot going to cost extra? Like, are they added on to the total?
Yes, they're
Yes,
part
it's,
of
it's
the.
a combination. I'm sure when you all go to the shopping centers, your school, you're going to see that you have a paved parking lot. Most of the time that has curbing, and then there'll be catch basins up against that curbing that collect the runoff from that parking lot. You'll still see that. When you drive into this site, you'll still see that. What you won't see is that there's going to be pipes, and I didn't bring a slide of that, very large pipes that sit underneath in this area, and they're all strung together side by side, tied together with other smaller pipes, and then they have stone around them. All that runoff goes into that and is stored and is released. So when you come to church and you use that parking lot, it won't look any different to you than any other parking lot you used to. All those pipes will be hidden. They will cost extra. As the pastor said, more and more facilities are using that because the additional cost to put those pipes in is far smaller than the value of the land that they are replacing. They give you more usable land. So it's really gotten to the point now where land is so much more valuable than the space that would have been used up if you had tried to do something on the surface.
So the cost of those pipes will give you that soccer field, baseball field, football field, whatever it is you like to play, softball, bocce ball, croquet, you name it.
Knitting. I was just caught up in the moment. Originally, we were looking at a far more expensive alternative to that stormwater management. Landmark came to us with an option. There's a fellow named Mike Briscoe that works along, as I've already said, that this is a less expensive alternative than what we could be. Could you just take a minute and express? He was talking about a system that would cost a lot more at first, and came up with this system.
Well, the industry that makes the piping systems that are used is basically there is a federal mandated code now that controls the quality and the quantity of runoff. The state of Delaware has adopted regulations in response to that, and then Newcastle County, in this case we're in the county, is responsible for making sure that everybody follows that state mandated code. They're basically the regulators. So the common problem that came up was every time you had to build one of these stormwater management systems, let's start talking about the ponds first, is that the ponds were unsafe. Kids could drown in them. The ponds are ugly because they're not being maintained. And then over time, when there's no maintenance, they start to get to be unsafe to where they could actually be breached. Water could break loose and go downstream and cause flooding. The county has recently gone back and they are checking ponds that were built 5-10 years ago, and they're finding them tremendously unsafe. They're trying to find out who's responsible for the maintenance and take care of all it. So that has led to further regulation where we have to do what's called BMPs, best management practices, and that means that we have to put in new green technology. We have to try to infiltrate as much water into the ground as we can. We need to be concerned about the quality of that. We have to make sure that fertilizers don't run off into the streams. So it's both quantity and quality. So in response to those high costs, the industry's tried to come up with some innovative approaches to try to address those issues without significantly increasing the cost. The latest is a system called StormTech, and these are half-round pipes. They're usually bright yellow. You may have gone by construction sites and seen them, but they're basically half-round. They have perforated holes in them, and they store the water, and you just put them together almost like a plastic kit. They're plastic pieces that you put together, string them right next to each other on stone, and then you build your normal parking lot over it. So it's much more cost-effective than these large corrugated metal or concrete pipes or boxes that you may have seen in the past. So that's what Mike was referring to.
When it's put together, it looks like if you would just take a pipe, I think it's 30 inches tall is the maximum.
There are different sizes. In this case, we were going to use 30 inches.
And you would split a pipe long ways in half, and you'd flip it upside down so that it's like this. And it sits, and then they pour concrete all around it. It sits on a bed of concrete, or of gravel, stone, sorry. And our water goes into them, and it's in that dome. It's held, that water, and then discharged like the bathtub illustration out the top of our property, just a little bit by little bit. And underneath that parking lot, there'll be water under there. You'll never see it, but it'll be down there. You could fish out of the grates. I don't know. not sure.
It sounds like me, we could order an extra piece of that and set it on your playground, and you have a nice little tunnel.
Hey, that's a good thing. Good thinking. Good thinking. Greg would like that. All right, Greg, your question. And Dave, did you have one more question? And we're going to try to close it down unless you have some really great question. We're going to be done here. Yes?
How many rooms are going to be in the church?
Okay, you should look at come up and look at this afterward and also out there. And there's going to be rooms on both sides, classrooms, and in the front, offices and bathrooms, and a nursery, and a big auditorium in the middle. And then in the back, some counseling rooms and baptismal rooms. And I think that's all the rooms, some janitor closets. And that's got about all the rooms. All right, yes, Dave, you had one more question?
Given that the building is going to be moved further back from the road, and in the models and the design so far, the lighthouse is going to be on the rear of the building.
Nah, it's going to slide to the front.
We're going to move it on up.
Yeah, it's a good thought. All right, anyone else? Yes, Al?
Question, with that design, how many signs will this property have for the church?
There is a very, very stiff signing code in Newcastle County, again, in responding to the proliferation of signs, especially on commercial property. So we are not sign consultants, but I would tell you that you probably are going to be limited to one major sign, monument type sign, and the best location would be there in the corner, obviously, for visibility. If the signs are smaller type signs, you might get away with one on each road. But I think for the size that you may want to put in, especially if it's a type that you might want to put an inspirational message or a message about meetings or things like that on it, you're probably going to be limited to one major sign. And then you'll be allowed identification type signing, the name of the church, on the church physically itself.
The sign that we presently have out there is the maximum square footage that we are allowed by Newcastle County. Now, we can have a beautiful giant stone or brick facade around that, but the actual sign itself, what the biggest you see is what you got. And we went and argued and worked, and actually Stan Baranowski tried very hard to get us bigger. That is it.
Can't be taller?
It can't be taller. Pastor, am I right? It can't be taller?
Not sure. The square footage is the largest.
The square footage is the maximum square footage. We do have some designs about the ultimate sign, but we have a few other things going right now that we have not finished. All right. Anybody else going once? Going twice. Let's all stand. Jack Miller, director of this building project, is going to come up here and close us in a word of prayer.